We're going to be looking at nutrition and metabolism. We're going to try not to spend a lot of time on nutritional things that you might have learned in your nutrition classes that you've taken, maybe just some review, but we're going to be talking about the objectives on that refer to that, like the process of carbohydrate metabolism. Says to summarize it, including glycolysis, anaerobic fermentation, describe the process of lipid metabolism, describe the process of protein metabolism, identify the three means by which the body loses heat, explain the negative feedback mechanisms that help regulate the body's temperature. So we're going to go through these some of these processes of metabolism. And the first thing you know when you study nutrition is that, and as we were talking about the digestive system, the nutrients follow the digestive system. The first thing we do is we ingest food, then we digest food, then we absorb food, and then we use it. We absorb the broken down particles or nutrients, and then we use them in our body. So the nutrients, when they get into the bloodstream, they enter cells and they undergo chemical reactions. And that is what metabolism is. It's through the process of metabolism that nutrients are transformed into energy or materials the body can either use or store. As shown here, some body systems demand a greater supply of energy than others. So the skeletal muscles take 22%, 16% is the remainder, but kidneys 8%, heart 9%, brain 20%, liver 21%, and the fat just 4%. So the units of energy in review are, it's measured by the output of heat from the body. Calorie, the amount of heat needed to raise the temperature of 1 gram of water by 1 degree Celsius, and the basal metabolic rate is the amount of energy the body needs at rest. Factors that increase metabolic rate include anxiety, fever, eating. The metabolic rate increases as the body processes the ingested food, and thyroid hormones. Physical activity also affects caloric need. To maintain weight, the calorie intake must equal output. So we just look at some factors that affect that. Body size. If you are larger or you have more muscle mass, you burn more calories. Gender. Male tend to have less body fat and more muscle than women of the same age and weight. Consequently, they burn more calories. And age. Muscle mass declines with age, slowing the metabolic rate. So we have some things to consider. The hypothalamus contains centers for both hunger and satiety, which, like being satisfied. Leptin, secreted by adipose tissue, signals the brain that the body has had enough energy stores and suppresses appetite. Obese people build up a resistance to the appetite-suppressing effects of leptin. Peptide YY or PYY is secreted by enteroendocrine cells in the ileum and the colon. Ghrelin, 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 secreted by parietal cells in the stomach, especially when the stomach is empty. Insulin alerts the brain to the amount of body fat and suppresses appetite. And cholecystokinin is secreted by cells in the duodenum and jejunum. This stimulates the secretion of bile and pancreatic enzymes and suppresses appetite. So which hormone stimulates the appetite? I think we know by now from the digestive system lecture that it's ghrelin, GHRELIN. So macronutrients are carbohydrates, lipids, protein, and water. Micronutrients are vitamins and minerals. Essential nutrients are obtained through the diet, and non-essential nutrients are synthesized by the body. So with just a little bit of review, we went over it a little bit in the digestive system as well. Carbohydrates are the body's primary energy source. Dietary carbohydrates occur in three forms. You have your monosaccharides, disaccharides, and polysaccharides. Examples of monosaccharides are glucose, fructose, and galactose. Examples of disaccharides are sucrose, table sugar, lactose, and maltose. Examples of polysaccharides are starches found in vegetables, grains, potatoes, rice, and legumes. Adults should obtain 40 to 50% of their calories from carbohydrates. So carbohydrates are real important to our diets. Lipids act as a reservoir of excess energy. It's an ideal substance for storing energy. It's more compact than carbohydrates. It's also more energy dense. Each gram of fat contains 9 calories per gram compared to 4 calories for each gram of carbohydrate. Fats can be saturated or unsaturated. Saturated fats are derived mainly from animals. They tend to be solid at room temperature. Includes hydrogenated oils such as margarine or shortening. And unsaturated fats occur in nuts, seeds, vegetable oils, and they tend to be in liquid form at room temperature. Ideally, fat should comprise no more than 30% of an adult's daily intake, with no more than 20% being saturated fat. Proteins. The body contains over 100,000 different proteins, with each consisting of various combinations of just 20 different amino acids. So during the process of digestion, proteins are broken down into their individual amino acids. Once absorbed, the body recombines amino acids to create a new protein for a specific purpose. Although the body cannot store extra amino acids, studies have shown that the body can combine complementary proteins that are consumed over the course of a day. It's not necessary for every amino acid to be present in the same meal for the body to create a new protein. Foods that supply all the essential amino acids, making them available at the same time, are called complete proteins. Foods that lack one or more essential amino acids are called incomplete proteins. Complete proteins mainly come from animal sources, and incomplete proteins come from plant sources. Now, we're not going to talk very much about vitamins. We're just describing a little bit. Water-soluble vitamins absorbed with water in the small intestine. They're excreted by the kidneys. If you take in more than you can use, you will excrete the rest. Fat-soluble vitamins are absorbed with dietary fat, and those are stored in liver and fat tissues. And almost all vitamins except for vitamin D, which can be formed by exposure of the skin to the sun, must be obtained through food. Vitamins A, E, and K are fat-soluble vitamins, A, E, D, and K. Because fat-soluble vitamins are stored, megadosing may lead to toxicity. So minerals are needed for vital functions, and the most abundant minerals are calcium and phosphorus. So the question is, non-essential amino acids are, and the answer to that is B. They're synthesized by the body. They're things that we make already, so we don't have to take them in. So let's look at metabolism. Metabolism is on page 419, and we're going to define some words: catabolism and anabolism. Catabolism breaks down complex substances into simpler ones or into energy, and anabolism forms complex substances out of simpler ones. So inside the cell, nutrients are transformed through metabolism into energy that the body can use immediately or store for later use. So this is using this these words. Catabolism is used in the metabolism of carbohydrates and lipids, and anabolism is used in protein metabolism. Because in catabolism, we're breaking down the carbohydrates and lipids. Anabolism, we are building or forming complex substances out of simpler ones. In the case of protein, it's amino acids. So the carbohydrate metabolism involves three phases: glycolysis, anaerobic fermentation, and aerobic respiration. All ingested carbohydrates are converted to glucose, most of which is immediately burned as energy. If the body doesn't need the glucose for immediate energy, it stores it as glycogen or converts it to lipids. The primary goal of glucose catabolism is to generate ATP. This occurs in three phases: glycolysis, anaerobic fermentation, and aerobic respiration. Processes that occur without oxygen are called anaerobic processes. If they require oxygen, they're called aerobic. Think of aerobic exercise. You need oxygen for it. So glycolysis occurs without oxygen. It splits one glucose molecule into two molecules of pyruvic acid. It releases only a fraction of available energy. So when oxygen is not available, such as during a period of intense exercise when the demand for energy exceeds the supply of oxygen, anaerobic fermentation occurs. When oxygen is available, aerobic respiration is the pathway of choice. So the pyruvic acid leads to lactic acid. Lactic acid is sent to the liver for storage. Lactic acid and pyruvic acid leads to aerobic respiration. So when oxygen is in short supply, pyruvic acid is converted into lactic acid. The lactic acid travels through the bloodstream to the liver where it is stored. Later, during a period of rest, when oxygen becomes available, the lactic acid is converted back into pyruvic acid. At that point, the pyruvic acid can enter the series of reactions in aerobic respiration. So aerobic respiration happens when oxygen is available. Pyruvic acid enters the mitochondria and is converted into acetyl coenzyme A. This begins a series of reactions called the citric acid cycle. This is followed another series of reactions called the electron transport chain. The end result is a complete breakdown of glucose into carbon dioxide, water, and large amounts of ATP. So all ingested carbohydrates are converted to C, glucose. That's the way they're going to be used. So let's look at lipid metabolism. When needed for energy, fat molecules stored in adipose tissue are hydrolyzed into glycerol and three molecules of fatty acid. Glycerol enters the glycolysis pathway and yields a small amount of energy. Fatty acids are broken down to form acetyl-CoA. Acetyl-CoA proceeds through the citric acid cycle and electron transport chain to yield large amounts of energy. When the body rapidly metabolizes fat, an excessive number of acetyl-CoA units are formed. The liver groups some of these units together to form ketone bodies. An accumulation of ketone bodies results in pH imbalance called ketoacidosis. Protein metabolism is used to build tissue. During digestion, proteins are broken down and amino acids recombine to form new proteins. So let's take a look at thermoregulation. Our body temperatures normally fluctuates, and most of the body's heat results as a byproduct of the chemical reactions occurring in cells. There are three main methods of heat loss: radiation, the transfer of heat through the air by electromagnetic heat waves, like standing in bright sunlight; or conduction, the transfer of heat between two materials that touch, for example, sitting in a seat someone just vacated or leaving a spoon in hot soup. And evaporation requires heat to change water into a gas. The hypothalamus acts as the body's thermostat. It monitors the temperature of the blood and sends signals to blood vessels and sweat glands. When the body temperature rises too high, the hypothalamus signals cutaneous blood vessels to dilate. More warm blood flows close to the body's surface and heat is lost through the skin. If the temperature remains high, sweat glands produce sweat, and the evaporation of sweat produces cooling. When the body temperature falls below normal, the hypothalamus signals cutaneous blood vessels to constrict. Instead of flowing to the skin, warm blood remains confined deep in the body. As a result, less heat is lost through the skin. If the temperature remains below normal, the body begins to shiver. Muscle contractions associated with shivering release heat and raise the body's temperature. So proteins are primarily used to what? Build tissue, store energy, produce energy, or generate heat. The correct answer is build tissue. So that concludes this chapter. Chapter 22, I want you to read it, and I want you to do the workbook on it, but you will not be tested on it. But you need to do the workbook and you need to read the chapter. All right? So that concludes the recording. Thank you.